Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling like something was off, but you couldn't explain why? Maybe a colleague's excuse didn't quite add up. A friend's story had holes in it. Someone you trusted gave you an answer that felt rehearsed. Here's what nobody tells you. Your instinct was probably right, but without proof, you stayed silent. The FBI has spent decades developing methods to expose deception in high-stakes interrogations. And by the end of this video, you'll know 9 of their most effective techniques to identify lies without ever making an accusation. However, the final method is different from all the others. It's not a technique at all. It's a psychological shift that makes everything else work. And here's the uncomfortable part. You've been lied to more times this month than you realize. Let's change that starting now. Let me tell you about the moment I realized I'd been asking all the wrong questions. I was working with a business partner on a project that was supposed to launch in 3 months. Every week, I'd check in. How's it going? Making progress? Everything on track? And every week, I get the same reassuring answers. Yeah, it's coming along. Just working through some details. Should be ready soon. 3 months turned into 6. 6 turned into 9. And when I finally demanded to see the actual work, I discovered almost nothing had been done. I'd been asking yes or no questions that were easy to deflect. I'd been accepting vague reassurances instead of demanding specifics. I'd made it incredibly easy for him to lie to me. That failure cost me time, money, and a friendship, but it taught me something invaluable. Most people make lying too easy. That's when I started studying how professionals extract truth. FBI interrogators, intelligence officers, investigators who can't afford to be fooled. And I discovered they don't rely on body language myths like liars avoid eye contact or they fidget when nervous. Research shows those signs are unreliable. Instead, they use psychological techniques that exploit how the human brain constructs and maintains deception. These methods work because lying requires mental effort. And when you know how to increase that effort strategically, lies collapse under their own weight. So let me show you exactly how to do this. Not to make you paranoid, but to give you the tools to protect yourself from people who don't deserve your trust. The first technique is called the assumption question. Here's the first mistake most people make when they suspect deception. They ask questions that give the other person an easy out. Did you finish that report? Can be answered with a simple yes or not yet. Were you really working late? Can be deflected with, yeah, it was a long day. These questions put the burden on you to prove they're lying. That's backwards. Instead, FBI agents use what I call assumption questions. You phrase your question as if you already know the answer, and you're just filling in details. Don't ask, did you go out last night? Instead, ask, where did you end up going last night? Don't ask, did you talk to the client? Instead, ask, what did the client say when you spoke with them? Notice the difference? You're not giving them a chance to deny. You're forcing them to either tell the truth or construct a detailed lie on the spot. If they weren't out last night, they now have to invent a location. If they didn't talk to the client, they have to fabricate a conversation. The more details they have to create in real time, the more likely they'll slip up or contradict themselves later. I use this constantly now. Instead of, did you review the document? I ask, what changes did you make when you reviewed it? If they actually reviewed it, they'll tell me. If they didn't, I'll see them scramble. Keep your tone casual and curious, not accusatory. You want them talking freely, building their story, creating more opportunities to catch inconsistencies. Number 2, the critical window. After you ask a question, you have approximately 5 seconds to observe their genuine reaction. This is what I call the critical window. It's the brief moment before their conscious mind takes control and manages their response. In those first 5 seconds, watch for multiple things happening simultaneously. Their facial expression, hand movements, voice tone, eye direction, posture shifts. After 5 seconds, they've had time to compose themselves. They've calculated what to say and how to say it. The authentic reaction is gone. But here's the crucial part that most people miss. A single unusual behavior means nothing. Maybe they always touch their face when thinking. Maybe they naturally look away to recall information. Maybe they're just tired or distracted. One sign is not evidence. However, when you see multiple indicators cluster together in those first 5 seconds, that's significant. If someone simultaneously breaks eye contact, touches their neck, and their voice pitch rises, that's a cluster. That's your brain detecting something wrong. I tested this during a team meeting. Asked someone about a missed deadline. In the first 5 seconds, they looked down, crossed their arms, and cleared their throat twice. 3 behaviors, 1 cluster. I knew the answer before they finished speaking. The key is establishing what's normal for that person first, which brings us to the next technique. Number 3, the baseline. Before FBI agents ask difficult questions, they spend time observing how someone behaves when they're comfortable and truthful. This is called establishing a behavioral baseline. It's a map of someone's normal patterns. How do they usually make eye contact? What's their typical speaking pace? Do they gesture with their hands? How do they sit? What's their default facial expression? You need to know what normal looks like before you can identify what's abnormal. Here's how you do it. Start every important conversation with easy, non-threatening questions that have no reason to trigger deception. How was your weekend? What did you think of that meeting? Have you tried that new coffee place? While they answer, you're not really listening to the content. You're cataloging their behavior patterns. Do they maintain steady eye contact or glance around? Do they speak quickly or slowly? Are they animated or reserved? Do they lean forward or sit back? That's their baseline. That's their truth-telling mode. Now, when you transition to questions that matter, questions where they might have motivation to deceive, watch for deviations from that baseline. If someone who normally looks at you directly suddenly studies the floor, that's a deviation. If someone who gives concise answers suddenly over-explains, that's a deviation. If someone who's been relaxed suddenly becomes rigid, that's a deviation. I use this technique in every negotiation now. I spend the first 15 minutes on casual conversation, not because I'm being polite, but because I'm building their behavioral map. Then, when we discuss terms, budgets, or commitments, I can immediately spot when something triggers a change in their demeanor. A person who is leaning in and engaged suddenly leans back when you mention price. They're uncomfortable with that number. Someone who is making consistent eye contact suddenly looks away when you ask about timeline. They're not confident they can deliver. The baseline gives you a reference point. Everything else is measured against it. Technique number 4, the repeat inquiry. This technique is devastatingly simple. Ask about the same event twice, but approach it from different angles. First time, you met with the supplier yesterday, correct? They confirm. They feel safe. The question is answered. Wait several minutes. Discuss other topics. Let them relax and think they're past that subject. Then circle back. What did the supplier say about the delivery timeline when you met? If they actually had the meeting, they'll answer naturally. The information is in their memory, easily accessible from any direction. But they lied about the meeting. They now have to invent details they didn't prepare. They have to make sure those details align with what they said earlier. They have to construct consistency on the fly. That's cognitively exhausting. And exhaustion leads to mistakes. Caught someone fabricating a client call this way. First question, how did the call with the client go? They gave a positive, vague response. 10 minutes later, what specific concerns did the client raise during your call? They hesitated, changed their story, contradicted the earlier version. The truth doesn't change when you ask it differently, but lies do. Memory is stable, fabrication is fragile. Use this technique by spacing out your questions and varying your approach. Don't make it obvious you're testing them. Keep it conversational. The 5th technique is the language pattern. When people lie, their word choices shift in predictable ways. They become more tentative, more qualified, more hedged. You'll hear phrases like, I think, probably, maybe, I guess. To be honest, to tell you the truth. These are what linguists call distancing qualifiers. They create psychological escape routes. If you challenge them later, they can say, well, I said I thought that was the case. I wasn't certain. They never committed. They left themselves room to retreat. However, not everyone who uses these phrases is lying. Some people are naturally cautious in their speech patterns. So the key is noticing when these qualifiers appear. If someone is confident and direct about minor details, it suddenly becomes vague and qualified about the crucial information. That shift is significant. I definitely left the office at 6 p.m., walked to my car, and I think I probably went straight home, maybe stopped somewhere. I'm not totally sure. They're certain about the setup, but uncertain about the important part. That's backwards. Another pattern, excessive emphasis. I absolutely did not take that money. I would never do that. I'm telling you the complete truth. Honest people don't need to convince you they're being honest. They just state facts. When someone works too hard to persuade you of their honesty, they're usually compensating for deception. Technique number 6, the subject shift. Watch what happens when you touch on a topic someone wants to avoid. They'll redirect the conversation, sometimes subtly, sometimes obviously. You ask about missing funds, and suddenly they're talking about a successful project from last month. You inquire about their whereabouts, and they pivot to asking about your weekend plans. You mention a deadline, and they remember an urgent email they need to send. This is a defensive maneuver. They're steering you away from dangerous territory before they have to construct a lie or reveal something they're hiding. The redirect is their shield. When you notice this pattern, don't let them control the conversation's direction. Acknowledge their new topic briefly, then return to your original question. That's interesting, but I'd like to understand more about the budget situation we were discussing. The resistance to staying on topic tells you that topic is problematic for them. Honest people don't avoid subjects. They address them directly and move on. Liars create detours. Next on the list is number 7, the interruption test. Maintaining a lie requires significant mental resources. The person has to remember what they've already said, invent details that sound plausible, monitor your reactions, and avoid contradictions. Their cognitive load is already high. So if you interrupt them mid-story with an unexpected question, you spike that load even higher. While they're explaining something, suddenly ask, wait, what time did you say this happened? Or, hold on, who else was there? This forces them to pause their narrative, process your question, answer it, and then resume their story without losing track of what they've already told you. For someone telling the truth, this is mildly annoying but manageable. They're just recalling events. For someone lying, this is cognitively overwhelming. They're juggling too many variables. Watch what happens after the interruption. Do they seamlessly continue? Or do they restart with different details? Do they seem confused about where they were in the story? Truth is flexible. You can interrupt it, question it, approach it from any angle, and it remains consistent. Lies are rigid, interrupt them, and they crack. The next technique is subtle, but remarkably effective. Number 8, the false detail. Intentionally introduce an incorrect detail into the conversation and see how they respond. So this happened on Tuesday, right? That was the day it was raining. If it didn't rain on Tuesday, someone telling the truth will correct you immediately. No, it was Wednesday and it wasn't raining. They're confident in their memory because they actually experienced the event, but someone lying will often accept your false detail. Why? Because they're afraid that contradicting you might expose their lie. They think you might know something they don't. They think you're testing them. So they agree with your incorrect information to avoid suspicion. Yeah, the rain was terrible that day. That agreement reveals the deception. I used this when someone claimed they'd attended a meeting. I said, right. That was the morning meeting in the conference room. The meeting had been in the afternoon in a different location. They agreed with my false version. I knew they hadn't been there. Use this sparingly and strategically. It's most effective when the false detail is plausible but verifiably wrong. Technique number 9 is the time verification. Ask for specific times and durations. Then do the math. What time did you leave? What time did you arrive? How long were you there? The people fabricating stories struggle with temporal consistency because they're inventing the timeline as they speak. They'll say they left at 7 p.m., arrived at 7:30 p.m., but the location is an hour away. Math doesn't work. They'll claim they were somewhere for 20 minutes but describe activities that would require an hour. Numbers are objective. Timelines are verifiable. Reality has constraints. Truth fits within those constraints. Lies don't. When someone's timeline has mathematical impossibilities, their story has fabrications. Caught a contractor lying about hours worked this way. He claimed 8 hours on site, but the work completed would have taken 3 hours maximum. The timeline exposed the deception without confrontation. Now here's what I promised you at the beginning. The method that makes all the others actually work. And it's not a technique. After studying these FBI methods and applying them for years, I realized something that changed my entire perspective. The problem isn't that we can't detect lies. We're already detecting them. Your gut tells you when something's wrong. Your instincts pick up on inconsistencies. Your subconscious processes all those micro signals. The problem is that we ignore what we know. We ignore it because confronting the truth is uncomfortable. It means difficult conversations. It means ending relationships. It means admitting we were wrong to trust someone. So we rationalize. We make excuses. We convince ourselves we're being paranoid. We choose the comfortable lie over the uncomfortable truth. FBI agents are trained to eliminate that emotional interference. They don't care if the truth is inconvenient. They don't care if the suspect is likable. They care about reality. And that's the shift you need to make. These 9 techniques are tools. But tools are useless if you lack the courage to act on what they reveal. The next time someone tells you something that doesn't feel right, don't immediately dismiss your instincts. Ask yourself, if I knew with certainty this person was lying, what would I do? Then do that thing. Not aggressively, not confrontationally, but decisively. Verify their claims, create distance, have the conversation you've been avoiding. Because people who lie to you once will lie to you again. And every time you accept it, you're teaching them you're an easy target. You now have 9 FBI techniques for identifying deception. The assumption in question, the critical window, the normal behavior map, the repeat inquiry, the language pattern, the subject shift, the interruption test, the false detail, the time verification. But more importantly, you understand the mindset that makes them effective. These aren't just about catching liars. They're about respecting yourself enough to demand honesty. Most people tolerate deception because they fear what truth requires. But temporary discomfort is nothing compared to the long-term cost of living in lies. When you stop accepting deception, people sense it. They know they can't manipulate you. You become someone who operates in reality, not fantasy. Someone who makes decisions based on facts, not hope. The techniques work. The question is whether you'll use them. What's it going to be? Will you keep ignoring the warning signs? Or will you start demanding truth in every area of your life? Because in a world where deception is common, people who can identify it have the advantage. They make better decisions. They build stronger relationships. They protect their time, resources, and trust. The methods are simple, but applying them requires courage. So the next time something doesn't add up, remember what you learned here. Thanks for watching and subscribe because we want to help you become better with every day.